If you make certain transactions frequently in QuickBooks, you can memorize them. This means you could have QuickBooks remind you when it's time to do a transaction, and you can even have QuickBooks do it for you. You can memorize almost every type of transaction in QuickBooks. I'm going to show you how to memorize an invoice and a bill. Memorizing an invoice is useful if you have one that you send out all the time. I'll click on Create Invoices and I'll hit the back button to pull the last one up. Here's an invoice for Benjamin Miranda. I send him this quite frequently, so I'll memorize this one. I can do that by either clicking the Memorize button on the top of the screen or by clicking Edit and choosing Memorize Invoice. This is going to bring up the Memorize Transaction dialog. Here's the name of the customer. I can choose whether I want to be reminded or not to create the next invoice. I can also have QuickBooks do it for me. If I want this to be added to the reminders list, I can tell QuickBooks how often I want to be reminded of it. Daily, weekly, monthly, or more. In fact, if I choose monthly, I can choose the next date that I want this to start happening. When I'm all done, I'll click the blue OK button, and we've memorized that transaction. I'll close out of this, and now let's memorize a bill. I'll click on Enter Bills, and there's a specific reason I chose bills to show you how to do this. You may get certain bills, such as a credit card, in which it comes from the same company every time, and it's due on the same day every month, but there's certain information that's variable in that bill, such as how much is due. So the first thing I'm going to do is set it for the particular vendor that I want to create my bill for. I can put in the bill date and any item, but what I'm going to leave blank is the amount due. This means that every time the transaction is going to be created, it's going to prompt me to fill in how much is due on that particular date. When I'm all done, I'll click Memorize. I can be reminded, but in this case, I'm going to have QuickBooks automatically create the entry for me by clicking Automate Transaction Entry. I can choose how often I want it to create the bill. This bill comes on a monthly basis. I can tell it when to start, and I can tell it how many items to create. Say this particular bill is only going to occur 5 times. I can choose the date in advance to enter the bill. For example, I don't want this bill created on the date that it's due. I need time to fill it out, print my check, and mail it to the vendor. So I'll give myself 5 days. I'll click OK, and my transaction is memorized. I'll close out of this. I'll say no to recording the transaction because I don't want to save this actual transaction. To view these memorized transactions, click Lists from the top of the screen and choose Memorize Transaction List. I can delete any memorized transaction by right-clicking on it and choosing Delete Memorized Transaction. But right now, I'm viewing them. I'll get a reminder from QuickBooks to create the invoice, but I can create it at any time by clicking on it. Note that it populates everything: the customer, the details, the invoice item, the date, even the balance due. The date is the particular date that I told QuickBooks I wanted to create it. When I'm done, I'll click Save and Close. I'm brought back to the Memorized Transaction list, and you'll notice that the next date has automatically increased to the next month. This is how you can memorize anything in QuickBooks, especially the things that you do frequently.